Alright, so now we are looking at compound interest. Now, first thing I want to differentiate between simple interest and compound interest is that for simple interest, the interest is the earnings on the total investment for the period. So the interest covers for the total number of years that investment is to last. But for compound interest, the compound interest is what? An interest that is accumulated annually. It is accumulated annually. So it's a reinvested interest. So it means for compound interest, I calculate my interest on an annual basis. Unlike simple interest, that this interest we calculate is for the total number of years. But compound interest, if my investment is for 6 years and I'm to use compound interest, then my interest is calculated on an annual basis. So because our interest is a reinvested interest, our formula for calculating for compound interest is this. A equals P into bracket 1 plus I raised to power what? N. N. So raised to power N here is because our interest is what? Compounding. So our interest compounding means that what? We are now this is when our interest is to be paid in a year, when it is not compounding. I will explain what it means for an interest to compound. You see, I said when interest is not compounding, when interest is compounding. So when the interest is not compounding, our compound interest formula will be what? A equals P into bracket 1 plus I raised to power what? N. Now when the interest is compounding, for interest to be compounded means that what? Interest can be paid more than once in a year. Yeah. When the interest is not compounding, it means that our interest rate or our interest is paid in full for a year, just for a year. So it means our interest is paid, let me say, if the investment is for 6 years, that means our interest is calculated for what? Yearly, annually, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, sixth year. But when interest is compounding, if our investment is for 6 years, then it means in the first year, interest can be paid quarterly, which is 3 times in a year. 4 times in a year. So it means 4 times in a year I am paying my interest. Then in 6 years, I'll be paying my interest how many times? 24 times. If my interest is monthly, it means that I'm going to, in 1 year, I'll be paying my interest 12 months. That's for my interest to compound. That's what it means when we say interest is compounding. So if our interest is compounded monthly, it means that we are paying that interest 12 times in 1 year. 12 times in 1 year. And if the investment is for 6 years, that means we are going to be paying the interest 72 times for the whole 6 years. That's what it means for interest to compound. So if you look at it, there is really no distinction in the formula, just that, yeah, the interest is compounded quarterly. So I have my what? Interest rate divided by what? 4. So we want to know, remember, if our interest rate is 10%, take note, this 10% will be given at an annual rate. Annual is 10% for the year. But if we are now compounding our interest to be on a quarterly basis, it means that we have to know how many percent of this 10% will be for each quarter. So if I say 10% divided by 4, so it means 0.025% will be for each quarter. So it means first quarter in the year, 0.025%, second quarter in the year, 0.025%, third quarter in the year, 0.025%, fourth quarter in the year, 0.025%. If you multiply by 4, everything gives you 10%. So it means 0.025 quarterly makes up an annual interest. Then if the interest is monthly, it means that 10% divided by 12, that's 0.0083 So that is how it works. So when we say our interest is compounding, it means that what we can pay that interest for a number of times in a year. So let's look at these two questions under compound interest. Number one, how much will 100,000 naira amount to at 8% per annum compound interest over 12 years? How much will 100,000 naira amount to at 8% per annum compound interest over 12 years? So which of the two formula are we using when interest is not compounding? Are we together? So it means here, this 8% is an annual what? Interest. So I will now come here. My P is what? Sorry. 100,000. My rate is what? 8%. That's 0.08. Then my time, which is also known as my N, is what? 12 years. So bring out your formula. A equals P into bracket 1 plus I raised to power what? N. So take note, this I is what? R over 100. That is when your interest is not compounding. So I'll now come here. That will be A equals, what's my P? 100,000 naira into bracket 1 plus, so my I here will now be R over 100, right? What's my R? 8 over 100 raised to power what? N. What's my N? 12. So A is what? 100,000 naira 1 plus, this is what? 0.08 raised to power 12. A will be what? 100,000 naira to bracket 1 plus 0.08 together was 1.08 raised to power what? 12. Now A is going to be what? 100,000 naira. Now 1.08 raised to power 12. So you first calculate this power 12 before multiplying by this. Don't do this times this power 12. No. You first do this value power 12. So this value power 12 will give 2.5182. 4 decimal places. So A will now be what? So multiply by 100,000. That will give us 251,820. So if we are to invest 100,000 naira at 8% compound interest for 12 years, so our amount is 251,820 naira. So let us see what will be our interest. So our interest for 12 years. Now take note, this is for 12 years. So our interest for 12 years will be what? 251,820 naira minus what? 100,000. Interest will be what? 151,820. So 151,820. But now this is interest for 12 years. So let's see, what's our annual interest? Annual interest. Well, the annual interest is not like it's a constant amount for the 12 years. Remember, I said the interest is reinvested. So the first year interest will be added to the second year's principal to get the principal for the second year. So that is why we might be getting this wrong by dividing this by 12 to say our annual interest is this. But understand how it works. This is how it works. If I have 10,000 naira at 10% for 2 years. So now, if I want to do this on compound interest, now my first year will be what? 10,000 naira times 0.1 times 1. Now, times 1 means I want to know how much will be my interest for first year. Now, this is going to give me 10,000 times 0.1. That's what? 1,000 naira. Now, 1,000 naira is my interest for the first year. So take note, this 1,000 naira is not going to be what I am charging as interest every year. No. For the second year now, look at it. second year principal will be 10,000 plus 1,000. That's what? 11,000. So this my 11,000 is now my principal for the second year. So how do I now calculate my interest for the second? That's why we say it's a reinvested interest. So look at it now. This 1,000 naira has been invested back to the principal to now give a sum of 11,000. So my interest for year 2 will now be what? 11,000 times 0.1 times 1. So 11,000 times 0.1, 1,100. So my interest for the first year is 1,000. My interest for the second year is 1,100. So my 2 years interest will be 1,000 plus 1,100. That's what? 2,100. So are we together? So that is how compound interest works. So take note, the interest is not a fixed amount of money annually. It's a reinvested what? Interest. So let's quickly look at the second one now. Mr. Obafemi kept a sum of 186,000 naira in a savings account, in which interest is compounded quarterly. So look at it now. In which interest is compounded quarterly. In which interest is compounded quarterly at an annual rate of 4%. Annual rate of 4%. The principal is 186,000 naira, in which interest is compounded quarterly at an annual rate of 4%. Now, if no additional deposit or withdrawal is made, how much will he have in his account at the end of 5 years? Now, our principal is what? 186,000 naira. Our interest rate is 4%. Then the number of times the interest is compounding is what? Quarterly. That's what? 4 times in a year. So that means we are paying 4% 4 times in a year. From the formula, remember when I was explaining the formula, R over 4. So it is this our interest rate we are spreading for the number of times the interest is compounding. So it means that we are paying this interest 4 times in a year. So I will be what? 0.04 divided by 4. That will be what? 0.01. So it means first quarter is 0.01, second quarter is 0.01, third quarter like that. Then N is what? 5, right? Times what? 4, which is quarterly, equals what? 20. Not 20 years though per se. The number of years the investment is to last is 5. But because our interest is paid 4 times, 4 quarters in a year, that's why we're multiplying it by 4. So that will now give us what? A equals P, 186,000 naira into bracket 1 plus R over N. So R over N, remember we have calculated it to be what? 0.01 per what? 20. Then 186,000 naira will give us 1.01 raised to power what? 20. So A will be what? 186,000 naira, 1.01 raised to power 20. That will be 1.2202. So multiply by 186,000, that will give us 226,955.35. So this is the amount we are going to be getting in our account at the end of 5 years. So what will be interest is what? 226,955.35 minus 186,000 minus 186,000, that will be 40,955.85. So that is our calculation concerning what? compound interest. So take note, one of the organizations that uses compound interest as a yardstick for their investment is banks. So when you want to go and make your investment in the bank will not grant your interest rate based on simple interest. No, the interest is on compounding. So it's based on what? Compound interest. Then we can, on our own, we can try to look at for what are those organizations, because these things are applications to what we do. We make investments. So we need to have full knowledge of how investments are being made. So let us take note. What are those organizations that when we want to make investments, they use compound interest? And so that is that about compound interest. Then the last aspect of time value of money we'll be looking at will be annuity, which will be solutions to be done immediately after this. Thank you.